Welcome to New Money. I'm Brian Hurst, and we're focusing on healthcare. Most companies have announced the increases on medical aid schemes for 2024. While the cost of living has risen sharply, one of the biggest expenses in most people's budgets is the cost of medical aid and allied healthcare products. This includes dreaded disease, critical illness attached to life policies, and disability income replacement. Making a rash decision to downgrade may not be the right solution for you. And joining me this evening is Clayton Samsudeen. He's Group CEO of Phoenix FSG. And Clayton, good to have you on the program.
Thank you.
Clayton, the Council for Medical Schemes sent out a circular to the industry saying, please don't increase rates by more than 5%.
Good.
Well, we're going to talk about the rate increases, but it appears anything between 7.5% and in some cases 11%. I mean, is there anything the Council can do further other than just to accept what the medical aids have done?
Well, let's first start that together with that circular that you're referring to by motivating or asking schemes to limit increases to 5%, there was another kind of portion to that where Council said, don't publish your increases without us signing off on those increases for 2024. So that didn't happen with 5 of the top largest schemes. And that led to the Council now saying, look, you're going to have to re-communicate or withdraw those announcements and mention to the members that those increases are subject to the Council for Medical Schemes approval, because the options and the increases as they stand now for those 5 schemes have not been approved.
So does the Council have muscle? Does it have teeth?
So what we're seeing now is Council is really trying to drive down the rising cost of healthcare. We've seen them achieve that the last 2 years, particularly due to COVID and the change in claiming patterns of members. But this time is different. So we're returning back to normality, and it is very difficult for, I think, to strike this delicate balance between maintaining benefits but also reducing or maintaining the cost. So all over globally, it is a known fact that healthcare inflation or medical inflation is at least 3 to 4 percentage points above normal inflation. So we're not going to, agree on a 5% increase as an example without cutting back on certain benefits dramatically. But I think what we're getting to now is a point where I think everyone is starting to realize there isn't a solution in the current form, meaning every year we have a situation where benefits are increasing by inflation, premiums are going up by higher than inflation, 3-4 percentage points, and you're purchasing less benefits every year. So there's an erosion of benefits, and I think everyone in the industry is realizing, wait a minute, we won't have an industry left if it carries on like this.
But Clayton, isn't this a problem? Because medical aids some years ago didn't have the required solvency margin of 25%. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, medical aid, we're divorcing the medical aid from the administration company.
Right.
So let's take a company like Discovery. Discovery administers a medical aid. Mm-hmm. Their medical aid in solvency requirements is 25%.
Correct.
If they've calculated that we need a certain amount of money over and above what the council medical schemes are allowing us, then surely that's going to have an impact on some of the smaller medical aids solvency margins.
Yeah, so correct. So that's what we call a death spiral in other instances. Is what you find happening is that the increases are too low and the claiming patterns are too high, and that's what would have happened in the Health Squared matter, you'll remember from last year, where the solvency just kept on reducing. So that's a good example of what happens. The problem you now have is that you've got an added disease burden called COVID. So we may have forgotten about it, but it's still having an impact in increasing the healthcare claims. And so what you're finding is 2 things is dramatic happening at the same time. One is we're returning to normal claiming patterns of members, and we've got an added disease burden subject to, or rather after the pandemic. And those 2 things collide in giving us these higher increases that we're experiencing now going into 2024.
So in your view, where to from here? Have the medical aids now actually withdrawn the notification? Because I got a very big notification from my medical aid company telling me all about the benefits and so on. Have they now withdrawn those? Are they now obliged to send a note to me and other members saying we're still in discussions.
Yeah, so the first thing they did was they decided to take up an appeals process, meaning trying to engage with the council. And most of the top 5 schemes, all of them, have good relationships with council. So I think they're trying to address this by virtue of an appeal and correspondence between the two. But if council have its way, schemes are going to have to announce that the increases announced previously is subject to council's approval. So that's happened every year. Every year schemes have done that for the past 2-3 decades. It's just this year council has kind of put a line in the sand and said, listen, we want a 5% increase, and if you want to announce your increases, we must approve it first. And I think that's where we have this discord at the moment.
So Clayton, what are the major factors contributing to increases in private healthcare?
So what we have is a situation, we still don't have a compulsory or mandatory medical scheme membership. And why? Because NHI is coming in. So it's kind of an anti-selective scenario. You're getting people that require medical schemes, or the young and the healthy join because they're forced to join by virtue of employment and employment contracts. And because of that, only people that actually need the medical aid join. So what we need is first thing I think is a mandatory type of cover to ensure everyone joins whether you use it or not, which is similar to an NHI model. The other component is, so because of that, you're having the average age of the members are increasing every year, and that increases the disease burden. On top of that, we have the advancements in technology, medical technology and treatments and so forth. And all of those things, add to the rising cost. There is a degree of abuse, there is a degree of mismanagement at, I would say, provider level. And those are things, but right now you're having a return of the pre-COVID claiming levels in addition to claiming for COVID related health conditions, and that's exacerbating the rising cost of healthcare at the moment.
And then, Clayton, let's just talk about, so we've got healthcare on the one side,
yeah,
and then we've got other options where there are out-of-pocket costs. Have they also risen?
Yes. So importantly, on the topic of options, and I just want to rewind to the one question you asked about the solvency of 25%. So one mustn't look at the solvency of the scheme as a whole. Every single option within that medical scheme must reach that solvency and must be profitable and sustainable. So therefore, you'll find certain options have a 3% increase because that's the claiming patterns of those members. Certain would have a 7.5, and then you'll be shocked. Some of them would have 12.7, 15.7% increase. That's 10% above inflation, simply because the members on that options, they claim a lot more. Then, to the topic of the associated costs that people don't really look at. So your self-payment gap, as an example, would be bigger. Co-payments increase with inflation too, and sometimes more. And so those are hidden increases in cases benefits reduce. So, schemes could reduce the medical savings account percentage from 25 to 20%. All those items mean that you're actually paying a lot more for your medical scheme than what you thought you are. But if you just looked at the increase, it's not a true reflection of the real increase of your medical aid.
What concerns you about the recent increases?
I think the biggest concern is that over the last few years, and I mean the economy, we also speak a lot about that. My concern is the buy downs. People are buying lower and lower and lower options, so they're coming in at the lower option. Existing members are buying down. My concern is that at some point, it will just simply become unaffordable. I mean, if you can recall, if we look at some of the top options if I may mention some, so in MediHelp you're looking at the 15.7% on the top option, on Discovery 12.7 odd percent. That is, really hard on a premium of 12, to 15,000 Rand a month. So you can imagine people will continue to buy down, they'll have less health care, and that's just going to exacerbate the problem. So I think everyone needs to sit around the table and come up with a solution going forward.
And that has a compounding effect I mean, if you're talking 10 to 12, you talk about the rule of 72. How long does money or the cost double? You divide the rates of increase into 72. At 12% into 72, you're talking medical aids doubling in 6 years' time.
Correct.
So a lot of people are going to go buy down. So then let me ask you this. What advice do you have? How do you think people, because we're now in October, we're not far away from November, what should members be doing now in trying to assess going forward what they should be? I know I've always said they need to get themselves a medical healthcare expert.
Correct.
And a financial planner may be able to do everything else, but medical aid is separate. It's a completely different component, although there is some correlation between the dreaded disease on a life policy and income protection and gap cover.
Correct.
But what would you be suggesting going forward members should now be thinking about, because we're middle October, and don't just leave it like we always do. I'll look at it another day. This is the biggest expense probably, other than the bond you have, if you have a bond, in your monthly and yearly expenses.
Yeah, so look, I couldn't agree with you more. The time is now to review your medical scheme for 2024 for a number of reasons, but also because we got a higher than usual increase than what we've had the last 2 years. So that is going to hurt the net disposable income. So the best place to start off with is, we always say this, is to ensure that you cover your major medical expenses first. So major medical expenses would be things like, what is the rate of hospital reimbursement that you're selecting? So if you don't have a gap cover product, as an example, that makes it difficult, because if you're selecting 100%, you would technically be out of pocket. Some options reimburse at 200%, at 300%. So we first go to ensuring the major medical. The next thing to look at is your chronic medication. If your chronic medication is part of the prescribed minimum benefits, meaning the 27 chronic conditions, then you could choose any option. However, if your chronic conditions is not one of that 27, you need to look for an option that covers that, and then it becomes a matter of understanding, what am I paying in premium for that cover versus the actual cost of the medication. So it doesn't help spending 1,500 extra on a premium and the medication costs 200 Rand. That's sort of silly. So that's sort of the type of advice that the broker would need to give. And then the smaller out-of-hospital expenses, you will deal with that later in the analysis process.
Well, we're certainly going to deal with all the emails when we come back. We're going to take a short break. Stay tuned, and we'll be back shortly.